All right, ladies and gentlemen, make some noise for the SSJ panel. Woo! This is a very special Q&A that we're going to be doing here. By the way, how many of you saw the concert that just ended about 5-10 minutes ago? Make some noise for that concert. Was that not insane? Absolutely. All right, so we're just going to dive right in here. Let's do some introductions. We'll start at the end. Mike Smith, everybody.
Hi, guys.
And then beside him, we have Scott Morgan.
Hi.
And Julian Dobos.
Julius.
Julius, I'm so sorry. So Julius Dobos.
I do that all the time.
Hey, everyone.
It's so great to have you guys here. Thank you so much for joining us here at MAGWest. We're really, really excited to pick your brain, not only about DBZ stuff, but about production, music, all kinds of stuff, because you guys have been in this industry for quite a long time. I think, perfect. And then also at the end of the panel, we're going to go ahead and have like a 15-20 minute audience Q&A where people are going to be able to line up, ask questions. It's going to be sick. All right, so one more time, let's make some noise and get into this.
Thank you, guys.
All right, so I'm your moderator, Dak, and I'm very, very honored to be here with you guys. DBZ was a huge part of my childhood growing up, buying the $30 Suncoast videos so I could watch the episodes 1 week early, downloading really sketchy fan subs from, Kazaa back in the day and getting viruses on my parents' computer, so...
That sounds legit to me.
Yeah. So this is really a special moment for me, and I'm sure everyone here is also probably feeling that. But before we dive into some of the DBZ stuff, I kind of wanted to ask, how did you guys get into this industry in the first place? And what were your first projects?
Shall I? Okay. So I was a music composition major in Dallas at SMU, and went from being in college, I graduated, but to running a lot of live sound. And
was there a doubt?
Was there a doubt that I would graduate?
Yeah,
when my dean was like, Mike, I think maybe you should choose a different major. I was not the student that applied myself that well in school, so I frustrated my professors, I guess, but I did graduate. Anyway, I went from there to running live sound in a section of Dallas called Deep Ellum, which was fantastic. I was partying with rock stars every night and having a good time, but then I wasn't really using my education as a composer, right? And so I wound up sending out a whole bunch of resumes, and this was back in the day when the way that you would apply for a job is you would print a bunch of resumes out on paper and distribute those to various potential employers. And I sent out, I think, like 150 of these. There's a directory in the state of Texas that's put out by the governor of the state of Texas. Now, that's a tradition. It's not a Greg Abbott thing, but this directory, correct me if I'm wrong, are you guys familiar with what I'm talking about? There's a film industry directory for the state of Texas, and all the professionals all register in it and stuff. So I got a hold of that.
I skipped that, I don't know.
And I sent out my resume to all these places, and I got one call back, and it was from Bruce Faulconer, and I went and started to work for him. And he was mixing audio for a television show on the Discovery Channel called Michael Holligan's Your New House. And this is one of the worst shows ever. It's really, really, really bad home improvement show that was on the Discovery Channel, where the incoming audio, they would record the audio and give it to us, and then we'd do the mix. And they would do things like talk and hit a hammer at the same time. conduct, interviews next to the noisiest piece of equipment in a factory. So it was a very challenging mixing job, right? But good training, good first audio for television job to have. But I got tired of it, after about 6 months, and then Bruce got this RFP from a company called Funimation.
What's an RFP?
A request for proposal. So Funimation would have sent out an RFP, like broadcast this thing, sent it out to everybody in the same damn directory that I used to get the job, right? Do you recall the directory I was talking about? So he gets this RFP and he sees it, reads it, says, well, there's no way, this is dumb, nobody can write music, turn around episodes this fast or whatever. And I begged him, I said, we got to try to do this, Bruce, come on, man, I got to stop doing this Michael Holligan here. And he was, oh shit, this was terrible. So he bid for it and we got the job and started working on Dragon Ball Z, which at the time,
Ed Mike wrote a ton of stuff
to prove to Bruce. I in one day wrote 10 of the first themes that we,
including the Ginyu theme, right?
Yeah, I think the Ginyu theme was in there, or at least, sketched them out. They weren't fully fleshed out or anything like that. But anyway, we got the job. I didn't know what Dragon Ball Z was, right? It was not as well known. Right, just getting off the ground, and or at least it wasn't as well known to me. But I poured my heart into it, and then Scott came along, and then Julius came along, and that's how I got into the industry. And honestly, I haven't really, I work as a business analyst these days for a software development company, so.
And you can still shred.
Oh, well, of course. But so I'm interested to hear what these guys' answers are to how they got into the industry.
Okay, so similar to Mike, mine starts in school. I started as a composition major, like Mike, and I went to the University of North Texas, and the composition department was into very avant-garde, kind of way crazy whacked outs to break all the rules, forget everything we've ever done before.
Ornette Coleman went to UNT, if you're familiar with him. Right.
He was kind of nuts.
Yeah, he was kind of nuts, right.
Anyway, but that's a different genre, but a different school too.
I thought he went to UNT.
Well, no, within UT,
yes,
there's the composition school, and then there's the jazz department, which
I'll stay out of it.
Very different divisions, completely different. Anyway, so pretty quickly I decided that I wanted to learn the rules before I broke them. I could break them on my own. I don't need somebody teaching me how to do that. So I switched to music theory and got a music theory degree, and then I went to jazz school because I had to get a taste of that at that school. Anyway, so while I was going for I was going to be a PhD guy. I was going to do jazz arranging and conducting, so I could work my way into film and stuff. That was my plan. But then, so I had a degree. And I was starting to get some of the chops that I had wanted from the jazz school, and then I saw this ad on the composition board for an assistant composer, and it was from Bruce Faulkner. And I actually knew another guy named Tom Faulkner, who the bassist for my college band worked for. It was funny. So I ended up calling him. I just assumed it was Tom. I was like, oh, I got this. I know this guy. And he's like, that wasn't me. I'm like, oh, shoot. And I got my first CD burner, and I made a demo, and I had gotten a bunch of professional equipment. I was kind of a trust fund baby.
This is late '90s, right?
Yeah. So I was using a DAT recorder and the Roland VS880, which is the first. It's the first non-linear multi-track recorder, digital recorder. So I had that right when it came out, and was producing stuff on that because I didn't have a computer, I didn't have a DAW. So I wrote some demos and put them on a CD, and I thought that was the shit, because who had CDs that you could give out?
Those were a step up over the cassette player that was so popular at the time.
Of course, then Bruce wanted DAT when I got there, but which was slightly higher resolution. Anyway, so yeah, I went and he's like, "Have you heard of Dragon Ball Z?" And I was like, "I've seen it in flipping through channels, I think, but I didn't really know anything about it." So I rented some VHS tapes. I think they're from what was it, Hollywood Video? Anyway, I think it was was it Tree of Might and Dead Zone maybe, and the first episodes of Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, and like boned up a little bit. And he had me write some spec stuff. There's a video up that has one of my audition pieces on my channel. But basically, he wanted me to write some fight music, and I wrote 3 fight examples. And he wanted me to do a Bulma theme, which I didn't know who she was. God, my Bulma theme was terrible. But anyway. But I had one that I kind of copied from the Ocean dub that he really liked, because it had all these crazy dissonant notes. Like I was going for this really angry sound, and he dug that. So I got the job, and I started out as an editor, and slowly worked in started doing composition eventually, and did more and more of that.
Well, and another thing was that we didn't have an in-house guitar player at the studio, so having Scott there to give us some, because I was using some pretty cheesy sampled guitars. You might hear that in some earlier Dragon Ball Z works that I did.
And believe it or not, I
before
did
Scott
try to
got there.
not go crazy with solos in this show. I was trying to keep it a soundtrack like. But anyway, Black Mike, I'm kind of sort of out of the industry, but not totally. Like I've been working as a programmer, a software engineer in games, and also in the music industry. I spent 5 years at Roland, and right now I work. If you guys have heard of Journey, which was for the PS3. I work for That Game Company. That is what they're called, That Game Company.
Wow.
And they have a game out called Sky. And so I work on the audio engine. I'm the main audio engine guy. I work on the music systems for that game and some other game tech for that. So pretty much all my work since then has been audio related, but not necessarily composition. I did score a video game a little bit after. It's called Empire's Dawn of the Modern World. It did kind of interactive, it's like just sort of generative music, but it's based on patterns and stuff that you define. So anyway, I've released a bunch of albums, but I haven't really been in the industry. I wouldn't say forever, because I sort of exited it. I don't know. I'm just sort of.
I guess with the line.
I'm like next to it. I don't know.
Yeah, next to it, right? Still active, but not. But
Sure. And are you still with That Game Company as of
Yeah,
now?
that's my current.
Oh, that's amazing.
Roland was my previous. Yeah, and I did Microsoft for a while, working on Xbox tech. I worked on a Call of Duty title. This is all as a programmer.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so the Microsoft, the Call of Duty, the Roland, and That Game Company is all as a programmer.
All like audio engineering?
Yeah, mostly. And then but Empire's Dawn of the Modern Worlds, I was a composer for that, but
That's amazing. I want to come back to that for sure. Julius,
Scott is the guy which happened earlier today. If you're running Windows and suddenly there's no audio, he pulls up the command prompt and he types in code and fixes it that way. I'm serious. He does that. So he's totally, he dreams code, I'm sure.
Wow.
it was a command line thing that I learned at
it's
Microsoft.
like, it's nothing. It was stupid.
That's amazing.
So you guys told your life story. I'm just gonna answer the question of how we got into into the industry. My story is quite different, and actually not nearly as Dragon Ball Z related or focused. I started really small. I was very young when I wanted to be a concert pianist. So I was taking piano lessons and practicing hours and hours every day, and was doing fairly well. But then I had enough of playing dead people's compositions, like Beethoven, Mozart, and people who I can't talk to. So it's like, okay, let's come up with something else. So I switched my interest and kind of like really my focus to writing, and I was 9 or 10 at that time. And then I thought, it would be nice to actually get something out of it other than just playing at home, like my own compositions. And I got into advertising. I had a few friends who connected me with some radio stations. Back then radio was still big. I mean, still okay today, but it was really big then. So I I wrote music for some radio commercials first. And then long story short, in the meantime, I was studying composition, went to a whole bunch of schools, didn't finish any one of them. And I got a lot of ideas, like very different ideas from a ton of them. This was all in Central Europe, where I'm from originally. And I studied film scoring specifically. And my dream was to get into film. In the meantime, I released a couple of albums. One of them went platinum in Europe. So, you would expect after a platinum album, like it was going to line up in front of your door. No. But I did get a feature film that I scored, and then after that I started getting some more to how does it connect to Dragon Ball Z, and I guess I take the story to that far. This was in '98, I think, when everyone was using dial-up modems. I don't know if anyone, well, you guys don't look like you would remember, but probably you know it from some movie. How it was chirping, and you wait a minute, and then pixel by pixel you start seeing the picture that you're trying to download. That was literally that slow. And so anyway, at that time, it was way before social networking and whatnot, it was a pretty miraculous thing that from Europe I bumped into a director from the Dallas area, and I was in Europe. She was in Dallas. It's pretty big difference both in distance and in culture. And so I think we bridged that quite well, because I told her that I've been doing composition, and we were just checking out the chat room or something. And long story short, she ended up sending me a script. I wrote it's a demo track. She really liked it, and it turns out that there was another composer in the run for this job to score this. It was a short film that was going to film festivals and whatnot. That was the plan. And the other composer was Bruce Faulconer.
Wow.
And to my surprise, well, at that time I didn't know from Europe, but after I moved to Texas, I learned that people in Texas really like to keep things in Texas. Let's not outsource too much. Let's keep it, homegrown, and I think that's very much true. Well, at least was very true for the music industry too.
There's a directory we keep. Yeah, did I tell you?
Did you mention that?
Yeah.
Oh, that's.
So anyway. How we connected is actually my music was chosen. I ended up scoring that film. Bruce was, as I heard, first pissed that he didn't get it, but then he would actually had to mix the film, so dialogue and sound effects and other things too, and he had to work with my music. And at that point, I guess he realized that it was probably decent. So. We connected, and he invited me to work on some, like it was not announced exactly what, but some shows or some work. I suppose that was probably like one of those horrible TV shows. I don't know what.
Like some PBS special on the Albuquerque Balloon Festival or something along those lines. Yeah.
But anyway, I ended up saying thank you, but no thank you. I'm good here in Europe. And then I scored some movies, and I ran out of kind of where to go, because European market is much smaller. So once you score a couple of movies, then that's basically you have made it. That's how far you can go. It's not like Hollywood turning out bigger and bigger movies every month. And so then I thought, you know what? Let's call him back. And we connected, and then I came, and it was an honor, to basically start working on shows. like a few days after I landed, and of course he had heard my previous releases and orchestral stuff that I had written, and then I started working on the show with Space Room being the first track.
Space Room that he played tonight.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what Dragon Ball Z was, even though at that time it was starting to get quite big.
Right.
Do you know how I realized it? I went to Target or Walmart, I don't remember, being brand new to the US, and I started seeing the characters that I was scoring for during the day on mugs and blankets and all that, like paperwork. Okay, so it must be pretty popular. So that's how I just kind of dropped into Dragon Ball Z.
That's amazing. I like how Bruce is kind of the connective tissue here a little bit.
Absolutely.
So in those early days, when you're probably still kind of finding your voice for the show, I mean, the Japanese scoring is, I would say it's quite different compared to, like the Funimation scoring. Certainly not nearly as energetic or as like epic, in my personal opinion. That was something that I even noticed as like a kid downloading like, subtitle versions and stuff, totally legally, and realizing like, oh wow, this is like really different. And my thought at the time was, well, maybe it's just because these episodes are like way in the future and they're ahead of us. And then of course, when we eventually caught up, I realized like, there's a lot more of a progressive sound, and it's very like heavy, and it's a lot of rock influence and stuff. And that's when I kind of like, it clicked that we weren't getting the same music that Japan was.
I think it's interesting that in Super, the music is more like what we wrote.
It really is. Like, and it's funny, even if you are Googling like the soundtracks for Dragon Ball Z, whether you're doing that in Japanese or English, most of the time it's the Funimation scoring that actually like pops up. It absolutely seems like that is kind of the real identity and the flavor of Dragon Ball Z. Of course, we're a little biased, we're all in the US, but I'd love to find out what was that kind of like, because you obviously had access to the scoring of the Japanese version. How did you kind of balance that, or did you? I don't know.
Well, no, that's a good question. No, I never listened to the Japanese soundtrack before I scored it, and really, I think that I was kind of, the intention was you're not trying to remake the Japanese score track or soundtrack when you're doing it.
It was a deliberate style shift.
Right.
Now, did that come from like Funimation? Right. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, a few things about it were kind of surprising, like wall-to-wall scoring. My understanding, Julius, Scott, you guys back me up or tell me I'm lying, but is that it's not really standard to have 21 minutes of music in a 21-minute show.
Not standard, no.
Right? Which was something that Funimation said it'll be wall-to-wall music, right? Which is kind of cool opportunity to, for young composers. Just you get to do the whole damn thing, right? Not a piece here and a piece there or something, but fill it all. So that kind of thing. But as you mentioned, what I thought of about not listening to the Japanese score. After I stopped working on Dragon Ball Z, I went and Mark Menza had started working on Dragon Ball GT, right? He had been doing it for a little while. I went and visited him at his studio, and we were talking and I said, well, what did you think about the Dragon Ball Z stuff? And he said, well, Funimation specifically said, don't listen to the Dragon Ball Z stuff. We want you to do something totally different, right? So.
Oh, that's super cool. Wow. That's really interesting that they just were like, have your own identity. So you probably watched the cartoons sans music, I'm guessing, or had.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Oh wow. So that's like interesting. But then, what, you just sort of like felt in your heart like this is what this guy sounds like.
So they did give us some direction, right?
Yes, there was direction.
As my hazy memory has it, I ignored those altogether, and just
He
went
did.
my own
He
way.
did.
And I think maybe that caused Scott some consternation. As he was doing a little more editing at the time, and he's like looking for things to follow the.
Even there, like I talked to Evan later, and they were well aware that their directions were impossible to follow, because they would mark every moment with a different thing, like
contrasting emotions.
Yeah,
and,
it was. You cannot shift music that often. We shifted music way too much.
a lot, like quickly.
Like I'm guilty, especially in early days of doing
Trying to follow that script.
trying to go too far. But even as a noob, I was like, this is too much. I gotta, like, especially if it's like a piece with a beat, that has some drive.
Right.
You can't just stop that all of a sudden. It's gotta play out a little bit at least.
So there is some sort of schizophrenic sounding stuff that that's stops on a dime, moves. But I think it's kind of cool in a way sometimes too.
Yeah, it's like it seems like there's a new aesthetic that I've seen like people emulate and
Right.
and like I mean it's Julius taught me a term that I didn't know, which was Mickey Mousing, which is a negative thing in the film industry, and we just thought we were being
What is
fancy.
Mickey Mousing?
Like it's where you, like in Mickey Mouse cartoons or like Looney Tunes or whatever. Carl, what's his name? Carl
Steiner.
Stalling. He would like write everything for every motion, like boop, 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 boop,
Very
like blink if you
right?
blink your eyes.
Right.
So they call that Mickey Mousing if you're overdoing the matching of hits
Gotcha.
to the action, because it's
We did a lot of
it's
that.
cartoony
yeah.
to do that. I mean, we're working a cartoon, so,
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
We did a lot of marimbas with eye blinks.
Oh yeah, Balm up.
Yeah, Bulma.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, that was me.
So
man.
so you guys.
That was me.
So it wasn't just the scoring, but you guys handled a lot of the sound effects and sort of the.
Well, let me get into that.
Sure,
So,
yeah.
There were the original Japanese sound effects, right? And they kept those.
Gotcha.
So what we would get from Funimation, we would get 2 or 3 a week, 2 or 3 episodes a week. They would send over chase tapes, and there were VHS tapes with the episode on it, the video. But then the left channel, I think it was the left channel, would have the voiceovers, and if they had the voiceovers done, and the sound effects on that, and then they would put the time striping on the right audio channel.
If you listen to the right channel, it would sound like a modem trying to connect or something, because it was just, you weren't supposed to listen to it. It was
that to interact with like some software or something?
Yeah, it would allow
okay.
us to sync up to the
controls
video.
the timing of it's old
Right.
tech for,
I had no idea
for
about that.
syncing up
That's
all the
interesting.
gear.
So
it took
I think
an
it's
enormous
worth
amount of
mentioning about that, because people take it for granted these days, like using GarageBand, or I'm sure everyone has tried something like that, and you put in a video, you put down some notes, you play it back, and the notes happen when you recorded them according to the video. Well, none of that technology existed at that time. What you had to do was, it was like I said, it's a VHS tape, which is nothing to do with your computer, but somehow you had to interface that with your computer, right? So when you put the notes down in the computer, you start the tape, you rewind it, you watch it again. How will the notes play back together exactly in the same moment when you recorded them? So there's a whole mechanism for that to make sure that they do play together. And believe it or not, it's like a quarter of a century ago.
Wow.
It was. I was pretty like I had to create. I didn't have a Pro Tools setup like these guys had, so I had this crazy self-created system that would where I would make. I can't remember. I had but tempo maps where I had all the tempo changes onto my VS-880, the hard disk recorder, and then I would have my keyboard running all the sequence. The notes that were on my keyboard itself, and then I did have Pro Tools, but I didn't have.
You didn't have the.
I didn't have the same
digital performance.
Yeah, I didn't have the connection, the timing gear that
Oh, okay,
something
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, we had.
I didn't have Performer. That's right.
It was called a sync, I think.
Yeah, I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't have Performer to like write the music on. Anyway, so I had this complicated setup just to try to control the tempos, get the music written on my keyboard and to have it sync with Pro Tools, playing back the mix of the show. And it was really cool when I finally got it all working, because you could just hit play on the VCR and then it would automatically kick Pro Tools into action. You'd hear whatever editing you had done, and then it would, the Roland VS-880 would control the tempo of my keyboard, and it would play all the notes automatically, and it would all match up, and then you could record the output of the keyboard into the show.
So long story short, synchronization was painful, and especially if you think about a bunch of blinking, you try to hit that with a keyboard, you go back and you can't edit it to a video because you don't have a video in the computer. So you move it around, you rewind the VHS tape, you play it again, see how far it is. If it's not correct, you go back, edit it, rewind it, watch it again. That's the kind of work we were doing for synchronization. And the chirping on the tape is the code that enables this synchronization.
It's still way easier than cutting up a tape and editing.
Sure.
It was a lot easier than a decade before.
Yeah, and it's a lot easier now. Wow, that's crazy. Going back to sort of the sort of back and forth with the composers and like Funimation. In terms of production, was it sort of a little like taking orders from somebody who maybe didn't understand the art form a little bit? And I guess, like, how would you maybe give advice to people who are working with, say, a producer or someone who might not totally be in tune with, you know, making sure that things aren't too Mickey Mousey or that they're too schizophrenic, right?
Well,
I would say Julius should answer this. He's had more experience
with working with various producers. Yeah, give this.
I mean, I've got my experiences, but he's got way more.
Well, it really depends on who you're working with. You have to know the person, you know, how far you can push it. Because if you're working with Ridley Scott or James Cameron, not that I have, I'm just saying based on their reputation, I don't think I would push things too far. Because they know how they want it. They're the director. They have a great overview of the project. They know much more than we even think we know. I've been in situations when I thought, you know what, this guy's just not getting it, and I would really like to do it in my way. And I actually learned from the process, because it turned out, looking back, I didn't get the big picture because I'm not the director. So I was seeing my angle, but not the 100% that the director sees. So you have to sort of watch for that and not push it too far. But in this case, it was very different. I never directly interfaced with the director in this case. I mean, the notes came. I saw the notes and I tried to kind of follow it, but that's the process where you know, you see this is what they want, this is what you think would work, and you try to massage it where it's a compromise, but it's not a compromise for the impact,
for the quality of it.
Exactly.
This is pretty different because we weren't interfacing directly with the client. There was levels of indirection, like we were writing the music, handing it to Bruce. It was going over to the directors at Funimation, and then they had guys who over there. I think the mixing engineer at one point was the guy who was writing the notes. So there was like this 4 steps to the person who was actually trying to tell us what to do, and then we get to the people who are actually doing it.
And Mike, you said that you got, what, around 3 episodes a week. So how quick was the turnaround on this?
It was very, very quick.
It varied.
Well, yeah, it varied, but I mean, as far as I understand, Julius, it was more rapid than other gigs require.
If an episode was all editing, I could do it in 2 days.
Wow.
If it even if it had some new music in it, like, because I started as an editor, and if I thought something needed music, I would just ask Mike.
He would do a good job of it in 2 days.
Sometimes I gave up, and I was like, Mike, write me something, and then and then Mike might spend a day on a piece or whatever, and it might only be 2 minutes or whatever, and the rest would be editing, and we could get the piece done in 2 days. But other times, I remember I spent more than a week on, like, there's a piece called Droids versus Bikers. I may have spent 2 weeks on that thing.
Wow.
It varied just depending on what.
Yeah, I would say it wasn't as fast-paced as advertising, but it was a little bit more faster-paced than your typical TV show, and definitely faster-paced than film, like feature film. So it was quite fast.
Well, and
But-
part of it is that all of it was ready to go pretty much. Like they had all this material that they were ready to push out instead of, they weren't developing the show.
It's not changing under your feet.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
by the way, we're changing the timing of this for. Yeah, that happens
Yeah.
when you're actually writing for something new all the time.
Sure. So, I mean, I personally have like a couple favorite tunes from the show. Probably Vegeta Super Saiyan is probably one of my favorites.
We need to add that
just
to
out of
the set.
curiosity, who was that? One of you guys? That was. Oh my God! It's such a great tune.
Well, thank you very much. That's one of them that I'm proud of.
Yeah,
So
it's got like a weird time signature thing at the
Yeah.
front too. I always thought that was super kooky.
That's one of the reasons we haven't done it live.
Oh, really? Well, I want to hear that
tried
next
to
time
tackle
for
that
sure.
yet, yeah.
But I'm really curious. Do you guys have any particular like standout tracks that you were either really proud of composing, or even tunes that maybe one of your colleagues wrote that you're like, that was banging.
That one, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead, please.
Okay. I got two that I'm proud of, I guess. One is probably the most well-known one that I worked on, which is PyCon. And then another one is one that's not as well known. Props to if anybody recognizes it, but Karoni and Peroski. It didn't have a name. It was just Karoni and Peroski. I think online I called Karoni and Peroski Live, but I got to show us some jazz chops.
Oh,
and
nice.
That guy. But speaking of others, I remember. I think I was pushing for more dissonance, nasty stuff in the score, and there was a scene. There's a piece called "Cell Rips Off."
There's 16 rips off.
16 rips off
that
Cell's
was-
tail. That's right. Oh, it's been a little while now. But I heard this thing and I was like, what the heck? Like I said, what was going on? How was your week last week, Mike? Because this thing is, and he was like, that was a rough week. That was.
So that one was almost what you might consider to be a little bit Mickey Mousing because there's so much action and it follows it a lot, right?
Right, but it's so dark and scary and like avant-garde and it's all
that's
these.
one of my favorite, one of the ones I'm most proud of. And so I don't know.
It's a
if you
piece
guys
of
are-
art. That thing, I love that piece.
I
We'll
don't
never
know.
do it live probably because
No,
it's
no.
way, 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 way too complicated.
But and it's like I couldn't show this to my mom and have her go, "Wow, that's really pretty," or anything like that. But it's piece that I personally am very proud of. Is 16 rips off Cell's tail.
Wait, so it's 16 rips off Cell's tail. That's what I got to YouTube after this?
That's right.
Beautiful. All right, we'll make a note of that on the...
Yeah, and you might recognize parts of it because I would edit in parts of that thing like crazy, and then Ben Kasparek, who came on later as an editor, he learned to do the same thing, and so there's this dun 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 dun.
Nice.
Yeah, sing it for us, Scott.
Can we just get a trio a cappella version of that, please? Julius, what about you?
Well, most people probably would expect me to say the SSJ3 transformation as the sort of most popular track. I think that we usually get the most requests
Undeniably.
about, but
So good.
but actually it's not on my list.
Really?
It's not. It's a cool track, but I don't know. To me, and I mentioned it in the show today. Go On Powers Up has a little bit different aesthetic. I don't know. It's just the melodies, the more sort of dancey, more electronic basis. So the aesthetic that I brought to, because Mike and Scott already established what we were talking about earlier, kind of stylistically and instrumentation-wise. Right? So when I joined the show, I actually had the challenge of adapting to that, but also bringing in my own aesthetic, which you can't sort of like take it off if you do this for a while.
And at the same time, Scott and I are like, "Who's the new guy?"
I actually didn't overlap much with Julius.
Yeah, we had like 3 weeks.
Most of our
something
experiences
overlap.
together has been post
Yep.
DBZ, but anyway.
For less than a month.
We did overlap a little bit.
So
And
wait,
then-
sorry. Around what time did you guys end up? Like around what episodes were you guys?
I
don't
started
know the
on
episode
68,
number.
right?
68. Okay.
Which I guess is
Because now I want to listen.
That's
for,
the beginning
for
of our
for
score, yeah.
Yeah.
that's when we took it over from Ocean Dub, right? And then you started on.
Oh, it was 78 as an editor. 94 was my first one to write for. It's confusing because my music was edited back into the 93, I think. But I actually wrote it for 94. We didn't always do the episodes in order.
And then
the
Scott-
Spirit Bomb was my first composition.
Yeah, Scott, you and I pretty much worked like maybe less than a month together, probably 3 weeks or something like that. So we kind of almost.
I thought it was shorter.
Oh.
Yeah, I think it was like 3 weeks or something. And then I don't
And
remember.
I was still there, by the way.
Yeah, Mike was still there.
yeah.
I don't remember the episode number. The one thing I know, if you know what the last episode number is, take 127 away from it, that's where I came in. So basically, 127 episode from the back is when I started with the Space Room was my first track, and then we moved forward with Mike, and then ended up finishing it, the series by myself. But I think to be fair and finish my answer about the favorite tracks, so mine might be favorite. My favorite might be Going Powers Up, but actually, my other favorite is the version of Trunks that we play in the show. And if you see the parallel, again, it's a very melodic and more electronic basis.
I was saying it's Mecha Trunks.
I like things more on the electronic or the orchestral side, kind of the opposites. And again, being from Europe, my background is not rock, definitely not heavy metal. The heavy metal track that or close to that, I ever wrote in my life was for DBZ, and it was in the Boo Saga and all that. So that was a brand new aesthetic for me, and I still gravitate towards the more electronic stuff.
Can I ask a question? How many of you guys produce music?
Okay.
Good bit.
Awesome.
Right on.
So I guess talking about producing music, what was life sort of like after DBZ? I mean, and that can be right after, that could be right now as well. And how did you sort of take a lot of those skill sets and apply them to whatever you ended up, or like basically what you're either doing now or immediately after the show?
So for me, after Dragon Ball Z, I worked on the set of Barney and Friends for several seasons as the set PA, which means I was the slave.
Wow.
I was the guy who would say, take one, and then jump away from the camera, and then Barney would get up and I love you, right?
Wow.
It's pretty crazy, right? There's a couple of bloopers videos. I don't know where you'd find them, but I'm the guy who's in every blooper because I was in front of the camera right when they would happen.
So why does Barney not have like a completely killer soundtrack then? Like, were you not like, hey guys, I know a way to really attract a good audience?
I think that's a pretty subjective statement.
Fair.
Okay.
No, I was not involved with the music production for Barney, just the take one.
And so what about now? Like what's basically anything that you've kind of taken just from your entire career and applied it to what you're doing now? I'm sure everyone would love to know, any little tidbits that you have.
Oh, man. Things that I learned from working on Dragon Ball Z that are...
Or just, throughout your career,
Save me. Gosh, let me get back to you on
Sure,
this
yeah.
one. Let me
Okay,
think
I can
about-
go.
Yeah.
So I actually want to give credit to Bruce for kind of teaching me how to write MIDI for orchestra and how to not make it sound computer. I know our stuff sounded super
very,
MIDI
very good
anyway,
orchestrator.
but there were techniques that I learned from Bruce to make it more natural sounding, and he was like, he didn't necessarily write a lot for the show. But when I first got hired, he was actually paying a lot of attention to what I was doing and making sure that I was living up to his standard. And so I did learn a lot from that. I also learned from Mike. And I particularly like the way he edits drums, and so the drums in PyCon are actually a tribute to Mike's drum programming style.
Yeah, I'd say there's a lot of technique that I picked up from there. When like earlier I said I'm not in the industry, I write music every day, and that being exposed to that, it had a profound effect on the way that I think about writing music. It's in so many ways.
What genres are you working with these days?
I'd say pop.
Yeah?
Yeah. I'm engaged to be married to that lovely lady in the orange shirt back there, Molly Fine. And she's a remarkable singer and performer, and so I've been working on some tunes for Molly to sing.
Are you planning on walking down the aisle to Hell's Bells? Obviously, right? That's the plan.
I think Molly would have to give us an answer to that.
Maybe.
There it is. Scott, I got a question for you. How did you take some skills from composing and editing and sort of parlay that into more of the audio engineering, especially the interactive stuff, because that's a completely different beast.
It is and it isn't. I mean, you're still doing a lot of the like writing music for games. There's a lot of the same techniques. It's just now that it's nonlinear, and so there had an extra element to that, and then just having worked as a composer, I really understood how to make tools for composers. Like when I was, I don't know if anybody here has heard of Jeremy Soule and Julian Soule. So I worked there. They had a startup called Virtual Sonics that became Roland Virtual Sonics, and that company is what became Roland Cloud, if anybody's heard of that. But anyway, so I was working on, they had this dream of really high quality orchestral libraries that people could use, and a new standard of MIDI and all that, and so I was working on these synths for them, and Julian is Jeremy's brother. I actually worked with him more than Jeremy himself. But at one point they called me the Julian Whisperer because I could create sounds that he liked, and I could create software that worked well for him.
Right.
And it was because I had been a client, and it was an advantage at Microsoft too. When I worked there, working on music software, I knew how to find the bugs. I knew how to test like a real a composer or somebody working in the industry, and I could find I used to win bug contests, finding all the issues.
That's the thing, bug contests?
Yeah, because you're trying to report the most bugs.
Right.
And as a tester, that's like a badge if you report the most bugs. So, I mean, in interactive music software, it's like, oh my God, there's so many bugs. It's so easy to find bugs.
There really are, yeah.
So I had an unfair advantage.
Right. You coded in your bugs to then later squash just to get the badge.
No, I wasn't. At that point, I was just a tester. That's what I did right after Dragon Ball. I had some training in programming because I had done it as a kid, and then I took some C++. I took an A class in C++. But I have this weird thing where when I was writing music professionally, I would go home and write code, and then it's not really as much. Well, that's true still. And when I work as a coder, I go home and I play music or write music or whatever. So I've always been doing both. But so my coding skills kind of developed. I don't know where this is going anymore. But
I mean, it really sounds like having that background as a musician was really critical to developing great software. And I mean, that game company, I don't know how long you've been with them, but I know that their sound engineering is critically acclaimed. phenomenal, and so are their soundtracks too.
I hope it stayed that way after I got. But yeah, it's affected my work at that game company too, because there's an instrument system in Sky where you can there's 15 buttons and they're all just like the major scale, but it's
Right.
not like Guitar Hero where you have a button and it changes its note depending on where you're at in the piece. Like if you play these pieces on the Sky interface, you can play them with the song or without the song. It's like a real instrument.
Right.
And so you find videos of people on YouTube who play in Studio Ghibli songs using our game. And there people have made like editors that emulate our game.
That's amazing.
And recently we just shipped a sequencer where you can actually, we licensed the Roland TR-909
Wow.
sounds to use, which is a temporary thing, but yeah, so that kind of work is definitely having a background as a composer and all that. It gives me insight into how I need to make these things
Right.
work, and it gives me strong opinions sometimes.
I mean, that's great. Julius, what about you? Post DBZ and beyond, sort of film production. Did you end up doing composing and continuing down that path?
Yeah. So I guess what I took away, what I learned from the DBZ scoring process and production is the same thing that I would recommend to everyone who is trying to get into this field. It's really the same thing, which is be versatile. I think there's a big difference between making music, putting up on SoundCloud or selling it on Bandcamp or whatever, and starting to have a following and a fan base versus working in the film industry. Because in the first one, you're creating a product that you want people to hopefully like and buy. In the film industry, you're providing a service, not a product. They're hiring you not for the product, but for your skills. But they're telling you really what they expect, and that's what you have to do. So if you want to get the job, you better be able to prove or show that you can do that. And it's not, these days especially, it's just such a competitive field. It doesn't work like, well, can you do it? Sure, yeah, we'll do it. Okay, well, here, is it part of your portfolio, your demo reel? Have you done that before? And if you have and it's successful, then you might be considered for that style or genre or whatever role. And so it's kind of sort of catch of 22, right? Because then how do you have the diversity if you can't get the job because you don't have the diversity on your portfolio? So basically you have to work with everyone and everything, any project you can grab, you have to grab, start collecting them and show that you can do the kind of work. And after a while, it's people will start believing you based on your portfolio. So for me, that was the biggest takeaway, that it's not necessarily what I want to write. Also, part of the takeaway was I did write for films, and I scored film scenes, and also it got into like writing music for specific scenes. It's kind of like cue scoring when you're not the only composer in the film, but you are given some cues, some sections or sequences of scenes.
Like for Paul Blart Mall Cop?
Like for Paul Blart Mall Cop.
Did you do Paul Blart Mall Cop?
I only did a little section of it, so I only wrote one piece. The movie is fun.
It is. It's great.
I worked in Zohan and a bunch of Adam Sandler films and whatnot. But at the end of the day, what I realized is that as cool as it is, I enjoy doing that once a year, maybe once in 2 years. Mm-hmm. So it's not that DBZ was too much, but I was working on the show we were working on Friday, like 2 years or whatever it was, just the new episodes. When it was done, then all the CDs that came out, the soundtrack releases, well, I had to work on those, right? Because they had to be...
And he says had to work on those.
Well, it's not composition. I mean, someone had to do it, right? With some sense of composition, but... So, it was a great experience. I wouldn't do other, if I could go back, I would do the same thing again. But also, once you dedicate your 2-3 years of your life, or in my case, actually 5.5 years I did that. You're a trooper.
Yeah.
Wow.
So after that, you want to do something else, and for me, that was my own releases. So I started my Forgotten Future project while I was composing for film and television, I created Forgotten Future, which has nothing to do with directors. I'm the director and the composer. Just like, you want to make your music and you want people to like it. So, and so that's what, that's kind of my main project that I do these days, and do shows and sometimes live performances, but mostly just sitting in a studio making sounds and writing music. Also, I ended up getting into education and teaching others how to get into the industry, how to do production, how to write, how to film score, and I'm local. So if you're also local, University of Silicon Valley is where I am a professor.
Yep.
Well, that's awesome. We're, I guess, technically at time, but I wanted to open up a quick Q&A if anyone in the audience has questions. We have a mic, but you can also just kind of raise your hand, and we'll probably take maybe one or two real quick if anybody has any questions. We got one right there.
Yeah, so kind of as a music producer myself that loves working with hardware and software, like over your time since like the last like 25 years, like watching it go mostly from hardware to software, like what are some kind of old workflow stuff that you like to hang on to?
So the question is, moving forward from 25 years ago,
Right.
things have gone
it's a
from
great
hardware
question.
to software. What are some of the key things that you've liked to hang on to
Right.
for your current workflow?
Like, is there a
Yeah.
tube compressor
Like,
that
are
I
you
like
still
to
using
plug
the old
into,
Roland
get the
synths?
sound out of or something? And there is.
I'm happy to answer
Yeah,
that.
yeah, why
I
don't
think,
you go ahead?
I think I'm the biggest sinner in that sense. I have a small actual music studio with about 45 synthesizers.
Yeah.
And the reason I use them, because people go and just to give you the answer that I don't know if you're looking for this, but people often compare the sound. Oh, does it sound as good as the vintage analog synthesizer from the late '60s, like a Moog or whatever? And the answer is it can. And in the track, when it's in mixed, no one's going to realize what it is. That's not the right focus. People are always just looking for, like cameras, pixel peeping. You know what that is when they're zooming in to see the edge of the pixels in a 4K, 8K picture. Does it have any glow or does it have any? Come on. You zoom out, look at the big picture. What does it sound or look like? That's what matters. So the difference and the reason why I'm holding on to those old synths is purely creative reasons. When you sit down to the computer and you're using the same instrument that you are using all day, which is called a mouse. That's what you use for browsing, for emailing, for everything, right? Or these days, just your finger and your phone. When you sit down at an actual instrument, that's not a program, it's a physical instrument, and it has knobs. First of all, how many cursors do you have? One, right? One mouse, one cursor. Yeah, you have, like the kind of the finger stuff, you can do 2, 3 fingers, whatever, different, articulations there. But when you sit down at an instrument and you play it, and you have knobs that you're tweaking, and when you're hearing where the sound is going, that's when you grab the other knob out of the 40 knobs or whatever. How you influence, you're literally sculpting your sound, you're shaping your sound, as opposed to a one-by-one process when you move the mouse, let's set this, let's go to this menu, okay, now let's go there. It's just not the same process. So that's the reason why I have so many synths, and also there are some unique ones that do sound actually different than any software. So for me, that's a big one.
For me, it's the VHS chase tape. I can't give it up.
Yeah. And you just listen to that right channel with the beats.
That's right.
You can
Just love
read the code like the Matrix at this point. That's beautiful. Well, I really want to thank you guys so much. I could do this all night. This is such a cool panel, and I'm really, really happy that you guys were here to take the time. Before we wrap up, I'd love to sort of kind of go down the line. If you guys have, like social media or anything where people could maybe contact you, either to have give you guys some more questions if they think of them afterwards, or connect with you in any way. Just let's go down the line and let people know sort of what you're up to.
I'm locked out of Facebook at the moment, and
It's not personal.
it's
And
not.
not political either.
So Scott's been making my apologies to everybody. Like he didn't just block you, man. He's not on Facebook. But I think I do have a YouTube channel called Michael Lloyd Smith. Right? Is that still working?
I think so, yeah.
So if you wanted to hear some old stuff that I put up a few years ago, but yeah, check out the Banana Boy video.
Banana Boy.
Yeah.
All right, I'll write that down.
So
Banana Boy's epic. That is
if
the
you-
most GBZ sounding thing on his channel, actually.
if you want to get in touch with me, go through Scott. Yeah.
Scott at morganstudios.com. I used the name Morgan Studios. It was the thing that I was trying to get business with game companies. Now I regret using that name because I put out 5 albums that really should have a more of an artist name than a stupid company sounding
Morgan Studio.
thing. But anyway, that's the Morgan Studios is actually a studio in London that went. They recorded a bunch of famous people, but I didn't know that at the time I started my thing. But anyway, so I have morganstudios.com, and then I have a YouTube channel. There's a lot of Dragon Ball. I've done a lot of fan service, kind of like I released a whole album called Z Music, and then there are other albums that have a fair amount of Z style music on it. Like there's another album called Legend of the Insane, which that's a reference to Brawley. I did so I wrote new themes for characters that I didn't write themes for when I was working on the show, like the Brawley theme.
Like Scott went from being somebody who was working on the show to a fan, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
They're like fan themes.
It literally
cool.
did. And in
And I
fact,
got to-
I want to say this: like, if it weren't for Scott actually keeping the love alive for a long time, like I think Julius and I had like compartmentalized this thing into the back of the closet. And Scott kept the love alive, and if it weren't for that, we probably wouldn't be here right now.
That's
But
true.
we're out of time. But I wanted to say the YouTube stuff is for YouTube, so it's not the same as I would write for the show because I'm showing off like visibly. You're seeing me play guitar, so I allowed myself to shred and like to do things that are a little bit more complicated and artsy and
Less in the service of that scene.
If you know what 12-tone music, there actually is some 12-tone music in Dragon Ball, but there's more of it that was kind of gratuitous on my YouTube channel.
Nice. What was the name of the channel one more time?
It's Morgan Studios.
Okay, great.
For me, I just give you 3 website URLs and all the social media is connected to those, so it's easy to find. If you would like to hear anything that I have been doing, I have done, especially film related, that's my name, juliusdobos.com, and everything is connected there, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, whatever. The other one I will give you is kind of my passion. Forgotten Future is more electronic, very layered, very kind of things that you would explore musically.
some beautiful stuff.
And so that's forgottenfuturemusic.com. You can actually remix some of the tracks and work with an interface where you decide how much of what part you're hearing, and the image changes according to that matches the feel of the music that you mix up. So it's like a pretty fun thing to explore. So forgottenfuturemusic.com. And the third one I would say is a fairly new passion that I started, which is AI-free.org. It's an organization that I started. I was talking about the old synthesizers, how just a different process when you're interfacing with something. Well, that's also true, in my opinion, with for humans. And I'm not buying into the this whole let's sit back and the car will take me home, and I forget how to drive, and my students are forgetting how to write in English. So I'm not into that, and I'm passionate enough that I started this organization. So if anyone here feels the same way and you don't want to give up all your choices and freedom of choices, then AI-free.org.
Wow. Thank you. That's great. Well, thank you guys again so much for being here. Hit them up if you have any more questions. And just one more time, let's give a gigantic round of applause for the three of these amazing composers, musicians, and all of the above. Thank you guys so, so much.
Thank you.
Thanks
for the great questions.
Yeah, it was fun.